In the last few months, Hollywood has said goodbye to names that shaped television, film, comedy, and American entertainment in ways many people never fully realized while they were still here. Some were faces we grew up watching. Some were voices behind unforgettable laughter. Some were character actors who made every scene feel more real. Some were legends behind the camera, shaping shows that became part of family life across generations. And some left far too soon, after private battles that reminded fans that even the people who seem larger than life are still human. Today, we remember 7 beloved stars and entertainment figures we recently lost. Not just by listing their names, but by remembering why they mattered. Because when a performer passes away, what disappears is not only a person. A whole part of our memory changes with them. The shows we watched as children feel different. The sitcoms that made us laugh feel softer. The movie scenes we quoted for years suddenly carry a little sadness. And the characters we thought would always be there remind us that time does not stop, even for the people who helped us escape it. Anne Schedeen. Anne Schedeen passed away at the age of 77, and for millions of viewers, her name immediately brings back one unforgettable television home. The Tanner family house from Alf. She played Kate Tanner, the mother on the beloved NBC sitcom that became one of the most recognizable shows of the 1980s. But Anne Schedeen's performance was more important than people sometimes realize. Because Alf was not an ordinary sitcom. It had a wild premise. An alien crashes into a suburban family's garage and becomes part of their lives. That kind of show could have easily become too silly to believe. But Anne gave it balance. She played Kate with frustration, warmth, intelligence, and the kind of grounded realism that made the absurd parts work. When Alf caused chaos, Kate was often the one reacting like a real mother would react. Tired, annoyed, protective, loving, and completely overwhelmed. That was the secret of the show. The alien was funny because the family felt real. And Anne Schedeen helped make that family real. Before Alf, she appeared in numerous television shows, including The $6 Million Man, The Bionic Woman, Three's Company, Cheers, Magnum P.I., and Murder, She Wrote. She was one of those working actresses who helped build the texture of television across decades. Not always the loudest name, not always the person on the poster, but always professional, always present, always part of the world audiences were invited into. Her family remembered her as creative, witty, and deeply loving. And that matters, because behind every familiar TV face is a real person whose life was bigger than the role that made them famous. Anne Schedeen gave viewers laughter, warmth, and one of the most recognizable sitcom mothers of the 1980s. And for that, her place in television history is safe. James Burrows. James Burrows was not simply a television director. He was one of the architects of American comedy. He passed away at the age of 85, leaving behind a career that touched more classic sitcoms than almost anyone else in television history. If you have ever laughed at Cheers, Taxi, Frasier, Friends, Will and Grace, The Big Bang Theory, or 2.5 Men, then you have felt James Burrows' influence. He directed more than 1,000 episodes of television. Think about that for a moment. More than 1,000 episodes. That is not just a career, that is an entire comedy language. Burrows understood something rare about sitcoms. He knew that comedy is not just about jokes. It is about rhythm, timing, energy, where a character stands. When a pause should last half a second longer. How an actor enters a room. How a line lands differently when the audience already loves the people saying it. That is why he was so trusted. Actors trusted him. Writers trusted him. Networks trusted him. Audiences may not always have known his name, but they knew his work. He helped create the feeling of comfort that made sitcoms part of American households. A living room, a bar, an apartment, a workplace. A group of flawed people who somehow became family. That was the world James Burrows helped perfect. He co-created Cheers, directed all episodes of the original run of Will and Grace, and helped shape shows that became cultural landmarks. His death is a reminder that television history is not only built by the stars we see, It is also built by the people behind the camera who know how to turn actors, scripts, sets, and silence into something that feels alive. James Burrows gave America laughter for more than 50 years. And that kind of legacy does not fade. It reruns. Paul Avery. Paul Avery passed away at the age of 81, along with his wife Sheila, in a tragic house fire in New Jersey. His death was sudden, heartbreaking, and devastating for those who knew him. To many viewers, Avery was best remembered for his long-running role as Huey, the bartender on All My Children. Soap operas have a special kind of place in American entertainment. They live in people's afternoons. They become part of routines. They keep families company. Characters enter homes not once, but day after day, year after year. That means the actors in those roles become familiar in a way that is hard to explain. They are not just watched. They are invited in. Paul Avery's role on All My Children made him part of that tradition. But his life was much larger than acting. He also worked in journalism, public service, and local community life. Reports remembered him as a Vietnam veteran, pilot, skydiver, journalist, and a deeply interesting man whose career and experiences stretched far beyond the screen. That is what makes his story so moving. Some performers become famous for one role, but the rest of their lives contain whole worlds the audience never sees. Paul Avery was one of those people. He lived many lives. Actor, veteran, writer, community figure, husband, father, neighbor. His passing alongside his wife made the loss even heavier. It was not only the death of a familiar television face, it was the loss of a couple, a household, and a shared life. For fans of All My Children, Paul Avery will remain part of a television era that valued long-form storytelling, daily drama, and characters who slowly became part of the audience's memory. His legacy is not only one role, it is a life fully lived. Tom Dreesen. Tom Dreesen passed away at the age of 86, and with him went one of the great old-school stories of American comedy. Dreesen was a stand-up comedian, actor, writer, storyteller, and entertainer whose career stretched across clubs, television, and some of the most legendary stages in the country. But many people remember him best for one extraordinary connection. Frank Sinatra. For years, Dreesen opened for Sinatra, traveling with one of the most famous singers in history and learning how to hold a room before the main event arrived. That is not an easy job. Opening for Sinatra meant standing in front of an audience waiting for a legend. They did not come to see you. They came to see him. But Tom Dreesen had the warmth, timing, and confidence to win them over. Before that, he made history with Tim Reed as part of one of America's first interracial comedy duos, Tim and Tom. At a time when racial tension was still deeply visible in American life, they used comedy to walk into uncomfortable spaces and make audiences think while they laughed. That kind of courage is easy to overlook decades later. But it was not easy then. Tom Dreesen did not build his career on shock alone. He built it on storytelling. He had that classic comic ability to make an audience feel like they were sitting with an old friend who happened to know exactly when to land the punchline. He appeared on national television hundreds of times, including many appearances on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. For comedians of his generation, Carson was not just a show. If you did well there, the country noticed. Dreesen did more than survive that stage. He belonged there. His passing is a reminder of a different comedy era. An era of nightclubs, tuxedos, roadwork, timing, discipline, and performers who could hold a microphone and build a whole world with nothing but a story. Tom Dreesen made people laugh for decades. And laughter, when it is honest, is a kind of service. Anthony Guidera. Anthony Guidera passed away at the age of 65 after a sudden medical emergency that left him on life support for weeks. He was known for roles in films such as The Godfather Part 3, Species, The Rock, and Armageddon. Guidera was not always the central star of the films he appeared in, but he belonged to a very important category of Hollywood performer. The memorable supporting actor. The actor who enters a scene and gives it texture. The actor whose face makes a thriller, crime drama, or action film feel more dangerous, more physical, more believable. In The Godfather Part 3, he was part of one of the most iconic film franchises ever made. In Species, he became part of a 1990s sci-fi thriller that many fans still remember for its atmosphere, tension, and strange place in pop culture. He also shared an MTV Movie Award moment connected to Species, showing how even a supporting role can become part of a film's public memory. But after acting, Guidera's life moved in a more spiritual direction. He was remembered for volunteer work with a spiritual organization and for the kindness he showed in his community. That part of his story matters because Hollywood often freezes people in their screen image. If you played a guard, a tough guy, or a dangerous man, people imagine that is who you are, but real people are more layered than their roles. Anthony Guidera's life reminds us that an actor's legacy is not only the characters they played, it is also the kindness they left behind when the cameras were off. His wife's tribute reflected deep love and sorrow, and that is always the part that matters most. Fans remember the movies, families remember the person. Number 6. James Tolkan. James Tolkan passed away at the age of 94, and if you grew up loving 1980s movies, you almost certainly remember his face. He was one of the great stern authority figures in American film. In Back to the Future, he played Principal Strickland, the no-nonsense school administrator who became unforgettable with just a few sharp lines and a permanently disapproving stare. In Top Gun, he played Commander Tom Stinger Jardian, bringing military authority and intensity to a movie full of young energy, ego, and speed. Tolkan had a gift. He could make a small role feel permanent. That is harder than it looks. Some actors need a whole film to become memorable. James Tolkan could do it in minutes. The shaved head, the glare, the clipped voice, the sense that if he walked into the room, someone was already in trouble. But what made him special was that he never felt like a cartoon. He gave authority weight. He gave irritation rhythm. He made strictness funny without fully losing its power. That is why audiences still quote and remember him. A character actor like James Tolkan is part of the foundation of film history. Movie stars may sell the poster, but character actors build the world. They make schools feel like schools. Military bases feel like military bases. Courtrooms feel like courtrooms. Offices feel like places where real people are under pressure. Tolkan also had a long theater background and was part of a generation of actors who treated craft seriously. That training showed he did not waste moments. He used them. His death marks the loss of a performer whose work may not always have been glamorous, but was absolutely unforgettable. And sometimes that is the highest compliment an actor can receive. Number 7. Eric Dane. Eric Dane passed away at the age of 53 after a battle with ALS, and his death hit fans especially hard because he was still young, still active, and still deeply connected to audiences across generations. To many, he will always be Dr. Mark Sloan McSteamy from Grey's Anatomy. That role made him a television star. But what made Eric Dane stand out was not only his looks or charm, it was the vulnerability he gradually brought to a character who could have easily remained shallow. Mark Sloan began as a symbol of swagger, but over time Dane gave him humor, regret, loyalty, pain, and softness. He turned a nickname into a person. That is why fans loved him. Later, a new generation discovered him through Euphoria, where he played Cal Jacobs, a deeply complicated and disturbing character, far removed from the romantic image many viewers associated with him. That role showed his range. He was willing to become uncomfortable on screen. He was willing to explore shame, secrecy, damage, and the darker side of identity. Not every actor wants to risk being disliked. Eric Dane did. And that is part of what made his later work so powerful. After publicly sharing his ALS diagnosis, he became an advocate for awareness around the disease. That added another layer to how people saw him, not just as a performer, but as someone facing a terrifying illness with honesty and courage. ALS is cruel. It takes strength, movement, independence, and time. For fans, seeing someone known for physical charisma and screen presence confront such a disease was deeply emotional. But Dane's openness helped others feel less alone. He leaves behind family, fans, memorable performances, and a reminder that vulnerability can become part of a legacy. His death is not just the loss of a handsome television star. It is the loss of an actor who kept evolving, and a man who allowed the public to see courage in a very real form. These 7 lives were different. Anne Schedeen gave warmth to a sitcom family that millions loved. James Burrows built the rhythm of modern television comedy. Paul Avery lived many lives beyond one beloved soap role. Tom Dreesen turned road comedy into a life of laughter and connection. Anthony Guidera gave memorable texture to major films and left behind a quieter spiritual legacy. James Tolkan proved that a character actor can become unforgettable with only a few scenes. Eric Dane showed that beauty, pain, vulnerability, and courage can exist in the same career. Some were actors, some were creators, some were comedians, some were behind-the-scenes giants. But all of them gave something to audiences. A laugh, a scene, a memory, a performance, a moment of comfort. And maybe that is why these losses feel personal even when we never met them, because entertainment does not stay on the screen. It enters our lives. It becomes the show our parents watched, the movie we saw with friends, the sitcom that played in the background after school, the character we quoted, the face we did not realize we would miss until it was gone. That is the strange power of performers. They become part of time, and when they pass away, we do not only lose them, we lose a small part of the era they helped create. So today, we remember them not as headlines, not as names on a list, but as people who gave their talent to the world and left something behind. May Anne Schedeen, James Burrows, Paul Avery, Tom Dreesen, Anthony Guidera, James Tolkan, and Eric Dane rest in peace. And may their work continue to live wherever someone presses play, hears a familiar voice, sees a familiar face, and remembers exactly why they mattered.